don't think they're understanding the fact that when you walk into that courtroom, and that's where the system's flawed, on the books, and technically you're innocent until proven guilty, and we touched on this on another podcast, you're really not. And the problem is, I don't know if it's resonating that jurors comprehend, it's the government's burden to prove guilt. Technically, a defendant doesn't even have to put a case on. They could just sit there and let the government try to prove they're guilty. And a lot of times they don't do that without having an exorbitant amount of reasonable doubt. The last case that I was involved with, which was very personal to me, obviously it was my father's case, and I worked, in addition to being on it professionally and working hard for as long as over 2.5 years on it, we really had high hopes because we knew going through it, number one, he was 100% innocent of all the charges brought against him. But number two, just by showing all of the facts, there was nothing but reasonable doubt. So in our minds, worst case scenario, if you just went by reasonable doubt, we felt it was a no-brainer. Because if one case had reasonable doubt, it was this case. I mean, even as far as every defendant involved. One of the items that stuck out to me was they tried saying the alleged getaway driver was driving, that his car was captured on video. And what amazed me with that is, when you looked up the model car, now mind you, there was no license plate of the car. It was just a side images from different angles of the car, of this model car driving on different streets. Now, when you looked up the model of the car, I looked it up, it was what was a 4th generation Hyundai. And the 4th generation ran from 2010 all the way to 2018. Now, the murder on this case that the defendants were being charged with took place in 2013. So this model car that they identified on this video, which, let's say that was the model car, and an expert came in and said it was a model car, that was that model car. You have to remember, that was a 4th generation Hyundai. So in other words, by saying that's the model car, that means it could have been, at that time, a 2010, a 2011, a 2012, or a 2013. 4 different years of that car that was identified on the video could have been 4 different years of that car. Now, how many of those type of cars where you have 4 different years, and it could have been different colors, because a lot of the footage, it was nighttime, so it's hard to tell. You could get a shade of it. You could tell if the color, the car was dark or light, and it was a lighter car. But statistically, how many of those model cars, if I was a juror, that's the first thing I'd be thinking. Once I realized that that car was made 2010, 11, 12, and 13, 4 years, and that's all you're really showing me on the video. You're not showing me definitively that that's the defendant's car. You're just telling me that that's the same model car. But you're almost playing with words, because you're trying to say, well, that's the exact, I believe the defendant had a 2012 model. So you're playing with words. You're trying to tell me that that's the 2012. When in reality, you can't confirm that. All they were able to really say was that was a 4th generation Hyundai, which really meant it could have only been a 2010, 11, 12, or 13. So again, it's smoke and mirrors. They're channeling things to make it look a certain way. And what bothers me is, how doesn't a juror realize that? How does a juror look at that without any defining marks? No dents, nothing to define, no license plate numbers, not even 1 or 2 numbers, nothing to define to definitively tell you that was the defendant's car, other than that it was the make. You can't even say it was the year, because as I just explained, it's a 4th generation, so you can't even narrow down the year. You could just say it was the make. And you have a 4-year span to pick, and a juror looks at that, and to them, there's no reasonable doubt. How's that possible? Why is it possible? Because they're throwing reasonable doubt out the window. They're not understanding what that means.